Todos ganan en el Mystery Sale de JCPenney. Apresúrate a la tienda de jueves a domingo para la entrega de cupones dorados mientras duren. Podrías ahorrar 30, 40 o hasta 50% extra. Y si eres súper suertudo, podrías obtener la oferta Jackpot y ahorrar $60 en tu compra de 60 o más. JCPenney. Vale la pena. Entrega de cupones solo en la tienda para mayores de 18 años. Cupón válido del 1 al 4 de agosto en selección de estilos. Aplican exclusiones. Detalles en la tienda.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Hello there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode number 640 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We told you we will be back in your feeds very, very soon, and we are back because we're going to talk a little recruiting. Recruiting trail is underway for the summertime, and it's really heating up. We are going to talk with an expert in the recruiting biz about some of our Dukies that are out there, or at least the potential Dukies that could be coming in next year's class. Before we get into all that, I am Donald Wine. I'm your host for this episode. I have Jason Evans with me. Jason, just want to let you know that we are watching the USA South Sudan game. It is in the fourth quarter, and rest assured, Jason Tatum has played. So we can bury everything we said in the last episode about Jason Tatum.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to bury it completely, but yeah, it's clear that Steve Kerr listened to me and heard my outrage and decided to make up for things by playing Jason, not only playing but starting Jason Tatum. I still think they need to figure out something with this men's national team where it's not 12 all-stars who all need to play. They need to find a way to get some role players in there. But at least he's spreading the minutes around a little bit better this game.
Yes, absolutely. And Kaba Malawatch is also playing. We'll talk about that a lot later. But right now, let's get into the recruiting aspect. And again, we have a national recruiting expert here with us today. Jamie Shaw, who is with On3's Sports. He's the senior national recruiting analyst for that website. It has been out there and the grind this summer with all of the different circuits that all of the AAU circuits and all of the circuits that a lot of these players like to be on. But Jamie Shaw, welcome to the DBR podcast, and thank you for joining us.
Donald, Jason, thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to talking some Duke basketball and some basketball recruiting, college basketball stuff at large as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just start with this question, right? That there's hundreds of recruits out there, and Duke has focused in on a few of them. But right now, if you go on your website on On3 Sports, I believe there's 13 players who technically have a scholarship offer to attend Duke University and play basketball on the men's basketball team. Of course, not all 13 are coming to Duke, but the main question is, from what you've heard throughout the summer and throughout the last few months, who is Duke looking at the hardest right now?
Well, you look through it, and they've cast a little bit of a wider net than usual. The 13 players that they have coming in, guys like Chris Sinak, Braylon Mullins, and Caden Lewis, and all that. For the purposes of this question, I want to focus in on three guys, Shelton Henderson and the Boozer twins, Cameron Boozer and Caden Boozer. Those are three players that I think that Duke has a good story to sell. They have ties to the program. And I think they're in a good spot right now as we head into visit season to possibly end up landing those three. Shelton Henderson is a 6'5" shooting guard. He's out of Houston, Texas. Houston, consequentially, is the main school that they're going for against him. Also, Louisville, Texas. They're all going to look at him as well. But he plays for the JL3 program. JL3 is run by John Lucas, the dad of Jay Lucas, coach at Duke as well. So he's got natural ties in there. Shelton Henderson, he's a scrappy, he's a tough guard. He can really defend, big, strong, and physical player. Can handle the ball a little bit, get downhill, and make some plays at the rim as well as pass the ball also. Then we have Cameron and Caden Boozer. I'm sure most of your listeners have heard those names before. Sons of Carlos Boozer, won a national championship at Duke, NBA All-Star, Utah Jazz, Chicago Bulls. They're twins, they're rising seniors. Cameron is the number 2 player. Caden is just outside of 5-star range, I believe, in the top 20. He's a point guard. Cameron's a 6'9" power forward. Those 3 combined they're 2 of the most winning basketball players that we've seen at the high school level, at least in recent memory, if not further than that. They've won 3 state championships, 7A in Florida. They've won 2 gold medals with USA Basketball. They've won 3 Peach Jams that they've played in. They've entered 7 seasons total between USA Basketball, between high school basketball, between AAU basketball, and won a championship in every single one of them that they've played in since being in high school. But their obvious tie being Carlos, their father, won a national championship at Duke. Miami's a stiff competition for those 2. They currently live in Miami, have been going to the Miami basketball camps for a long time. And other schools, Michigan's been talked about a little bit. Arkansas, they visited Calipari at Kentucky. Florida getting in the mix as well. But Duke has a good story to sell them as well.
We want to focus in on the Boozer twins because we've heard about them obviously for a long time. We actually had Carlos Boozer on the show a couple years back, kind of talking about when they were starting to enter this world of recruitment and how it was for him as a parent as opposed to him as the player from 20 years back. But with the Boozer twins, we've heard some ups and downs about the recruitment as far as, they're wanting to create a new legacy, especially Cameron Boozer, who is the one of the heralded players in this class. Talk to me about a little bit about where you see them, and is that going to be a major factor? Because obviously there's some players who love to follow in their parents' footsteps, mother or father, and there are some who want to chart their own path. Is that going to be a make or break situation when it comes to the Boozer twins?
So I think that the Boozers do want to charge their own path and do all that type of stuff, but that's not necessarily a one-to-one thing. You can still go to your father's or mother's alma mater and all that type of stuff, and still build your own legacy. I think these 2 are not even really thinking about that necessarily, and not thinking about what their dad did there and what their dad was able to do with Duke and everything. They just have familiarity with Duke. They have familiarity with the program, and Duke is one of those programs that's, they're considered a blue blood right now. They're one of those programs that can call any kid in the country and they'll take the phone call. So I don't necessarily think that they're shying away from following in dad's footsteps by any stretch. They definitely want to go and push forward their own personal legacy that they've already started to build. So I think those 2 things can be one and the same.
Hey, Jamie, really quick, just want to super fast follow. Do you have any sense of a timeline maybe on the Boozer twins when you feel like they might make their decision?
Well, they have maintained that they want to make an early decision. They have maintained that they want to get it done. Hopefully, as they have said, they would prefer to have it done before the high school season starts. We have heard rumblings as to they will start really focusing down on their recruitment process after Peach Jam ended, which was a couple of weeks ago. So that puts us anytime between now and the next probably eight weeks or so. Not sure if they're going to take any more visits or not. They've said maybe one. They've said none. They said they're going to go ahead and move forward. They're pretty secretive and close to the vest with things when it comes to their recruitment. That being said, sometime in the next probably 8 or so weeks, 8 to 12 weeks, we'll see pretty definitive movement. It sounds like.
And one more follow-up there, because it's something that someone brought up to me the other day. We're going to talk more about NIL and what a huge role that now plays in recruiting. For someone like the Boozer twins, I mean, it's public knowledge their father made hundreds of millions of dollars playing professional basketball. I mean, certainly this is not a family where, trying to eke out an extra $100,000 from an NIL offer is going to make a difference. Do you get the sense that these guys, because they're in that unique position of having a father who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, that they just, NIL just isn't part of the equation with them?
I don't. I mean, I don't think NIL is going to necessarily be the deciding the end all be all factor. I think it's going to play a role. I think it's going to be in there. You know, a lot of people, just as it was talked about before with Donald, everybody wants to people want to forge their own paths and all that type of stuff. So, you know, that even comes with kids. You know, they want to make their own monies and have their own funds and all that type. So not to say that they're going to go in there and go to the highest bidder, not to say they're going to go in there and NIL is going to be the end all be all factor with it. But I think that NIL is a conversation that will be had. And that goes for most recruits.
Yeah, it goes for pretty much everybody. Let me take us a different direction for a moment, if I can. You mentioned three guys that you wanted to focus in on for Duke. We mentioned that Duke has more than a dozen offers out there. And I know you're not a Duke-specific recruiting analyst. You're covering the entire country, so this may be a little too specific of a question, but do you get the feeling that Duke and other schools are maybe looking at smaller freshman classes versus in the past? Duke's bringing in 6 freshmen this year. Do you get the feeling that maybe they aren't going to try and bring in quite so many guys as freshmen to perhaps have room for more guys coming from the transfer portal, as they move forward?
Well, I think it depends on which guys. I don't think Duke will bring in 6 guys just to bring in 6 guys. I think more so that if they get the right 6 guys, I don't think they'll have a problem bringing in that number. The idea is to be competitive next year, and the players that you can put on the floor with a Duke jersey on to be competitive next year are the players that they're going to go after. They've identified a certain number of players. They have 13 offers out right now. And obviously there's a pecking order toward those 13 offers, but there's a certain number of guys that they'll take right now. And if they can get those guys, I think they'll take those guys. It doesn't matter what the number is. Also, with that being said, the NCAA has recently expanded the scholarship roster out to 15, which gives you 2 extra scholarships to be able to play with, as to whether or not to add them to high school or transfer portal, or however a school wants to utilize those. There's a little bit more wiggle room now to play with to add roster spots from 13 to 15 as well. But I think with the right guys, they've identified, they've scouted, and they have, if they're able to get the right guys, I don't think there's a cap on the number or threshold of what they want to take.
You know, following up on that, and that kind of leads into the next question that I had. You mentioned the scholarship expansion. We actually had just talked about that on our most previous show, where it feels like, for all intents and purposes, schools, if they wanted to, could eliminate having walk-ons on their rosters because they have 15 scholarships to play with, especially in basketball. Do you think that that is something that they're going to aim to do, that a lot of teams are just going to say, hey, we can extend the number of offers we have because we have 2 extra coming in next year? And then also with NIL, as you mentioned earlier, NIL considerations vary from player to player, but has it slowed things down a little bit because NIL considerations are starting to take more of a forefront now that you're not necessarily considering this school being a preferred walk-on versus this other school who's offering me a scholarship?
So I think that when it comes to I think schools will still feel that out. Again, when it comes to kind of that, I don't think they're going to take 15 just to take 15, just to have 15 players there. They want the right players. Obviously, as we know, within a rotation, typically as it gets deeper in the season, you only see a rotation go to about 8 or so. So that leaves 7 spots that aren't getting much playing time. So how can you best juggle your roster to be the most competitive for that season? Some guys will keep 12 or 13 to see what happens if somebody comes free in December, to see if somebody to keep roster spots open for the portal the following year. There's just always wiggle room to play with if you keep a roster spot or 2 open. And if you have those extra roster spots, giving it to walk-ons and all that type of stuff is also well within reason. But I think a lot of schools, they're not going to take guys just to take guys, but they're going to create kind of a vision as to what they want to do. Maybe use those last 2 roster spots for guys that they wouldn't have recruited in the past, but develop, kind of put them on the end of the bench, get them in the program, and be able to have them in practice and develop them to what they look like as juniors or seniors. Or as you said, a guy that's been there for 3 years as a walk-on, give him a scholarship to reward him a senior. You see that a lot in football. So I think guys are still figuring it out as to how they're going to exactly best use those 15 spots.
I want to go back to obviously at the top you mentioned that there's three guys that that might be the primary focus for Duke. You mentioned the Boozer twins, and you also mentioned Shelton Henderson. I want to go back to him for a second because I think that is a name that has appeared recently on our radar, and it's not necessarily one that a lot of fans out there might know about. So talk to us about Shelton Henderson, what kind of game he has, and again the timeline for him as to when we can maybe hear from him on a decision.
He's a strong physical player, 6'5", 200 pounds, long arms. I guess the take home initially would be the defense, the perimeter defense is able to guard up and down the lineup, the 1, 2, or 3, get in the passing lane, and move his feet at the point of attack, and really cuts down angles from would-be attackers trying to touch the paint. Offensively, he's comfortable with the ball in his hands. He can push the break off of a rebound, and he can reinitiate some offense. Reset, get the ball to the right spots, not turn it over, and handle the ball, touch the paint, attack the basket. Jump shot's kind of the question mark with him. He's going to have to develop that to be a little bit more consistent. But the athleticism, the feel, he's got real competitive nature to him. It's kind of all there. And the timeline for him, he's wanting to sign early. He's talking about visits, as I mentioned, Texas, Louisville, Duke as well. Houston's still involved. They're a local school to him. But he's talking about wanting to sign early.
Hey, Jimmy, who are the most impressive players you've seen this summer? As you've been out on the circuit, you were at the AA, all the AAU events. Who are the guys that you're just like, yeah, that dude is ready?
Two of them come to mind immediately. AJ Dabansa, who's the number one guy for us right now, and then Cameron Boozer is the other one. Both those guys, they play with the USA U17 basketball, went out, won gold medal. Cameron Boozer was the MVP of the tournament, averaged over 20 points, almost 10 rebounds a game of the U17 World Cup. AJ Dabansa had a really good showing there as well. Then they both come back to Peach Jam and play each other in the finals of Peach Jam. AJ Dabansa averaged 23.1 points throughout Peach Jam. Cam Boozer, 20 and 10, as we've seen per usual. AJ Dabansa, he's a long, athletic, very skilled wing, about 6'9". He goes, and he was wildly impressive at the USA U17 training camp. Being out there, being in the gym for the training camp in Colorado Springs, the leadership, the dominance, how vocal he was very impressive. Talking to some NBA scouts and everything. I even had one NBA scout tell me that for them, he would have been the number one pick in this year's draft, next year's draft, and the 2026 draft, which AJ is going to be a part of. So obviously that was just one scout and all that type of stuff, but that's the type of impression that he left in Colorado Springs during that training camp, and then throughout that whole process, coming back to help lead his Oakland Soldiers team to the championship finals, where they dropped to Cameron Boozer and company. But averaging 23 a game there. And then Cameron Boozer, he's just become the model of consistency in high school basketball. We've talked about it before. He's won at every level. He's also been one of the most productive players on the floor in everything that he's won as well. Through both gold medals. Again, he was the MVP of this year's U17 World Cup. Coming in, winning Peach Jam yet again, which he's done for the third straight year. High school state championship last year, not this past year, but the previous year, sophomore year, he was the National Gatorade Player of the Year, National Max Preps Player of the Year. He's just become the model of consistency, and almost in a Tim Duncan manner. I don't want to call it boring because what he does is so impressive, but it's just you come to expect it so much, and it almost gets overlooked at times because he has done it for so long at such a high level.
So I want to ask a question because On3, you guys have been like the absolute leaders in NIL being a big deal. I remember, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, you all started, putting out like these NIL valuations and stuff like that. Everyone's like, what is that? What's going on? We have seen NIL explode in such a huge way. I sort of have 2 questions for you connected to it. The first one is, has NIL, and by that I mean the size of the check, has that taken over completely for most kids for relationships? It used to be a kid would be like, I'm going to this school because I have a great relationship with this coach. Are they now going to that school because they have a great relationship with the Czech? And then my other question, well, go ahead and answer that one, then I'll do a follow, but go ahead.
Yeah, so my answer to that is I don't think it's taken the place of relationships. I don't think it's taken the place of development. It has become a piece of the puzzle that has to be in line, just like development has to be in line, just like, relationship has to be in line. I think relationships is what gets you to the table. And then both parties have to sit down and look and see if everything that they want makes sense on both sides. And whether that be development, whether it be playing time, whether that be NIL, whatever those things are that are most important, I think relationship gets you to the table. And I think those things need to be agreed upon with it. So I don't think relationships or NIL has taken the place, but I think it has been added to the puzzle.
Okay, so then my other follow is this. We've started to get some real hints about the size of the NIL packages of guys in the transfer portal. We've had multiple reports of guys who got as much as $2 million this past spring when they entered the portal. There's been a lot of other talk of they're probably, a year ago, there may have been a small handful of guys getting $1 million. You probably know better than I do. My bet is that, among transfer portal guys, there probably are dozens this year that got more than $1 million from the school that they're attending. What's your impression of the high school NIL dollars? Are there a lot of high school recruits who are getting $7-figure $1 million plus offers, or is that something that tends to be reserved a little bit more for the transfer portal guys who are a little more established?
So that's a tricky question to answer. For starters,
and I'm not asking you to name any names or
no. For starters, there's a lot of numbers that go around when it comes to somebody signing, somebody committing to a school. You hear upwards of 2 million. You hear 1 million, 1 point, all these numbers that go around, and then you hear after the fact that person maybe only saw 700,000 or they didn't. All this type of stuff that goes around. So all the numbers that you see floating around on the internet should be taken with a grain of salt. As they're not a public record, and all that. So with that being said, on the high school level, again, going back to the initial question, the coaches have a chart of what they think will help them win next year. They want to get wins on the board. NIL, you're worth, when it comes to life, you're worth what your boss will pay you. When it comes to me at On3, my worth is what I can get paid. When it comes to the local car salesman, they're worth what they'll get paid. When it comes to that, people's value is what their boss sees them as, that'll pay them. So there are high school kids that could come into college basketball at the highest level next year and help teams win championships. There are guys that could come in even for 1 year and elevate that program to be a championship level type of program. So as to what an NIL value is on that, that's within what that coach sees in that player and how they can put it together within their roster to help win. But there are guys in high school basketball that can come in and immediately help elevate a program to championship level type of basketball.
With all of the NIL talk, with all of the transfer portal talk that we've heard over the last few months, it's interesting because at first it felt like that there was some sort of de-emphasis on high school recruiting, and then you get to the summertime and all you hear about is all these recruits just going ham on the AAU circuits. So and there's no coach. Everyone says, oh, there's no coaches really going to see these guys, and then all of a sudden you see some of these players who have like 40-50 coaches in the gym wanting to watch them play. You've been out there. Is that the truth, right? What's going on out there in the AAU circus? Does it feel like there's sort of a not necessarily a de-emphasis, but more of a let up on the high school recruiting in lieu or in place of the portal, or is it as robust a recruiting trail as ever?
Yeah, so I think we're starting to see that kind of even itself out. I think there was a couple of years there once the transfer portal opened, where everybody was still trying to figure it out. I think now this year we're starting to see more of an emphasis go back toward the high school recruiting and understanding the COVID year is coming to an end. This will be the last year of extra fifth-year guys with COVID and all that type of stuff. So there's going to be an influx of guys that leave college basketball, maybe even two classes worth of players, the fifth years and the normal fourth years leave after this season. So there's going to be more roster spots to come open as well. With the NCAA expanding to 15 scholarships, that gives people 2 extra scholarships to work with however they want to do it. NCAA is allowing extra coaches on the road now, to where you can have some coaches that stay back and other guys that go out onto the road to watch and evaluate players. So I think everything's kind of evening itself out. I think there was a couple-year period there where high school recruiting definitely took the back seat because coaches wanted to get older. They wanted to look at the transfer portal. They didn't even take high school kids. They didn't even recruit high school kids in the early period to see what they would get late. But I think now this summer we saw coaches, even at the NCAA academies, the very last July live session, head coaches were on the road watching players, evaluating talent, assistant coaches out and all that type of stuff too. So I feel like we're starting to see the emphasis come back toward high school basketball recruiting as well. I think you put it in a great way. I think your phrasing was good there, as robust as ever, because you're having to pay attention to the portal because that's a real thing. You're having to pay attention to high school because that's a real thing as well. There's a lot of talk on the road from college coaches, especially in July. There just hadn't been any time off because they're having to go through the portal, to go back to high school, then readjust. And now kids are back on campus. So there hasn't been, whereas previously they've been able to take vacations with families and stuff. They haven't been able to really do that this year. Because as you said, as robust as ever, the recruiting pool.
Jamie, last question. We do appreciate your time so much, man. I want to ask about Jon Scheyer. You're a guy who's been out there in recruiting circles for a while. Jon Scheyer, even prior to taking the head coaching job at Duke, I think was pretty widely known as perhaps, if not the best recruiting assistant that there was in the college coaching ranks. Now as a head coach, he's doing nothing but bringing in number 1 classes and number 1 players left and right. What is it about Jon Scheyer that you've seen on the road that says to you, that's why this guy is next level? That's why this guy connects with these kids in a way other people don't. That's why he's always bringing in the top guys. And as you put it, that's why if the phone rings and it's coming from Duke, everyone answers the call.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of stuff goes into that. I think, for starters, Jon was a player himself. Jon has a long resume, so to speak, as a player that he can present. I think kids are still know who Jon Scheyer is at this point in time. It's not like he played, 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatnot. I think people still know the Jon Scheyer name through as a player, moving into the coach. And then, Coach K built such an unbelievable thing there at Duke. So, he was the successor. He was the appointed successor. And Duke has been built into such a program as to where that logo speaks volumes as well. So I think that plays a part of it too. He's young. He's relatable. He knows what it takes to be a high-level player. He knows what it takes to succeed as a high-level player. And I want to go back on the word I just said too, relatable. Talking to him in person, he's a very genuine person. When I sit down and talk to Jon, when I have a phone call with Jon, or, when we're just I'm at a practice and just talking, he makes you feel like you're that only person that's kind of there in the room with him. He's got a very genuine nature to him, and charm and all that type of stuff. And I think that kind of helps it as well. So the fact that, it's a player with a relatable personality, who's recruiting for Duke, I think all of that type of stuff kind of comes together where he's able to have some success and get players and continue to build upon what Coach K built.
So last question, I usually ask this of a former Duke player. We always ask for stories about Coach K or about Jon Scheyer. Do you happen to have any stories, either insightful or funny, that maybe you've heard or maybe you saw yourself while you were out on the recruiting trail and either heard or saw something amusing about Jon Scheyer or Coach K? Just between us, man. We won't spread it around. No.
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't really have any funny, insightful stuff. all of my interactions with John are, you know, they're just good and wholesome. Nothing too crazy happens or anything, or all that type of stuff. So no, he's a good guy, and he's really done a good job. And I'm excited to see kind of where the program continues to go.
Simple sometimes is the only thing that you need to be effective, and we like that.
Yeah.
Here at the Duke Basketball Roundup. Jamie Shaw, again, thank you so much for joining us. Before we let you go, tell the people where they can find you and your work at On3.
Yeah, so www.on3.com is the website. On3 Recruits is on X, and On3 at On3 on Instagram. Me personally at Jamie Shaw 5, JAMIESHAW 5 on X, and then Jamie_Shaw 5 on Instagram. Make sure you tune into it. Make sure you see we had all the breaking news, all the latest and greatest in the recruiting. We try to tell the story from start to finish, where things are at each point in time. Today, I just put out an article as to kind of call your shot, where things are at leading into the season. If the guys were to commit today, top 50 type players, where would I predict them to go? Joe Tipton, my colleague, just put one out the other day on 5 stars, where he predicts them to go. So we try to tell the entire recruiting story step by step. From the process to where they just start all the way to when they graduate and head on to college. So make sure you check it out on 3.com.
Hey, Jamie, did you predict anybody to Duke today?
Yes, Caden Boozer and Shelton Henderson.
I like both.
What about Cameron? Caden and Cameron, or just Caden?
Well, I didn't do Cameron today because I just did the 4 stars in the top 50. Joe predicted Cameron to Duke on Monday.
Gotcha. Perfect.
we like that. Hey, your work is great over there at On3, and as the clock is about to strike August, your work really begins. So Godspeed to you, and hopefully you and Joe and the rest of the staff there can eventually get some rest once this recruiting trail is done. Jamie Shaw, Senior National Recruiting Analyst for On3 Sports. Thank you so much once again for joining the DBR podcast. All right, we are back, and we just want to thank Jamie Shaw once again for coming on the show. Really insightful stuff, and for us, Jason, I know you're a recruiting guy. You are in this a lot more than I am. I like to kind of be hands off until a certain point when we get towards the finish line, and then I come in and be the closer. I'm kind of like Coach K in that regard. But I thought it was some very insightful stuff, and really the one thing that I thought was the biggest bell that rang in my head was that I've heard so much about how the Boozers are not coming to Duke, and they want to follow them. They don't want to follow their dad's footsteps. And it seems that very much that it is not necessarily, it's not a foregone conclusion for any of these guys, but there's a really good chance that we could land the Boozer twins in Durham next year.
Yeah, and that'd be a very big deal because by landing both of them, I think you're getting a huge boost to your program for 1 year, and then a pretty nice boost for a year or two beyond that, because Cameron Boozer is clearly going to be a one and done prospect, likely to be, top 2, top 3 in his draft class after his freshman season. He is so everyone, you heard Jamie talk about it. Everyone says it. Consistent, every single game. You can bank on Cameron Boozer being a monster on the boards, being super efficient. This is a guy who hits 70+% of his shots. He's able to go inside and out. He's actually a really effective outside shooter. And plays defense at both ends. Just the epitome of a guy who brings his lunch pail to the office every damn day and gets it done. And he boosts and elevates his teammates, and they do nothing but win. At every level, every time. They just win. But Caden Boozer, who we didn't talk about nearly as much, is another guy who he's almost certainly not going to be one and done. But he is a guy who, over the course of a few years, is going to develop into a dynamic point guard. His ability to see the floor, to spread the ball around to different teammates, another guy who plays at both ends of the floor and plays really solid defense. That's why I'm so excited about the Boozers, is because the immediate impact of Cameron, and then the multi-year impact I think you get from someone like Caden.
The one thing that I took to heart when he mentioned the most impressive players, he mentioned AJ DeBonsa, and then he mentioned Cameron Boozer. Cameron Boozer, a guy who, like you said, is very consistent about how well he plays, but still finds a way to impress you. I think that's a really innate quality that a lot of players don't have. I also think, the one thing that I've heard from about Caden Boozer is a lot of comparisons thrown around about how, not necessarily what how his game looks, but what his trajectory could be. Trey Jones was one that came up quite a bit. A guy who sticks around a couple years, but can give you just absolutely solid work for those 2 years and really, again, make your team better as a quarterback of the offense. I think I would love to be compared to Trey Jones in anything, but especially in the basketball court, I think that's a really, really cool thing. Jason, anything else on the Jamie Shaw interview that you took to heart?
Yeah. So two other things I wanted to mention really quickly. The first one is the fact that he really, he said there are 13 offers out there. Other than the Boozers and Shelton Henderson, it didn't feel to me. I mean, there was no one else that he mentioned a couple other guys, but there was no one else that he really specifically honed in on. It does feel like Duke and everyone else that recruiting is just sort of pushed back a little bit, that it's just on a different kind of time frame. And I think that's interesting. I think that, things are going to pick up now, where things are going to develop more. We used to get summer recruits. We used to have guys commit, usually you and I were doing bonus episodes, emergency episodes in June and July, not anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
July
and there's been a lot of guys who've considered, I mean, AJ DeBonsa, has reclassified into this class, but he did that like a year ago. Cooper Flagg reclassified a year ago. So it's not like we're calling each other in August and saying, oh, by the way, we have a recruit now because some guy just reclassified and decided he's coming now. That part has been escalating or at least accelerating. It feels like all of this is to plan, right? It's everyone understands what the timeline is. And part of that timeline is announcing things early. He mentioned the Boozer twins probably are going to announce in the next 8 to 12 weeks. Jason, that's putting us right at around late October, which is when we found out about Cooper Flagg. So, signing day, I think, is still in November. The first signing day period is in November. And it seems like a lot of guys want to get all of that out of the way so that on signing day, they're not getting a billion calls about where they're going to go.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to mention, this is something that came up with Jamie late in our conversation, but to me, I immediately noted it. I immediately wrote it down. There has not been any time off.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really thought about that much, but yeah, if you're a college coach, if you're John Shire and the other guys on the staff who are really, knee deep in this recruiting stuff, you had the entire regular season, you had the postseason that went all the way almost to the cusp of the Final Four for Duke. The second it ended, you had the drama, the angst of who's staying, who's leaving, and who are we getting from the transfer portal. And then the second that ended, you're knee deep into high school recruiting, and high school recruiting is yet to, not just for Duke, but for almost all the programs, high school recruiting is yet to produce anyone who's going to be on your roster for next year. I mean, Coach K used to take time off and go to Vegas every summer. Guys used to have some downtime. When does John Shire have downtime? There's no downtime anymore.
Well, there used to be a dead period, right? There used to be a dead recruiting period where, for what was it, 45 days, you couldn't make any calls. You couldn't contact anybody. You could get your ducks in a row so that when that thing ended, for the most part, that's when a lot of these guys said, oh, I don't have to recruit. I don't have to worry about the team. And also, if you think about it, they didn't have interactions with the current team during the summer. Now they do. So that is an even added element where he's going to get back and go, oh, right, there's a team that's been training all summer in my gym. I should go check in on them. It seems like it's a year-round sport now.
Yeah. And I mean, these guys are very well compensated. We talk about NIL deals. These coaches are still making millions of dollars as well. So they're well compensated, but man, it is a 24/7, 365 job. It feels like at this point. And you can see why a lot of the older guys, Coach K, Roy Williams, and on, Jim Boeheim, that these guys are just like, okay, I'm done. Find me younger legs to take me forward from here.
And as as this schedule gets tweaked, right? I wonder if the NCAA at one point institutes another dead period in the spring so that everybody can get some rest, right? I feel like, even recruiting for high schoolers is a year-round sport. We've heard, seen in, from some of these articles that recruiting for the portal sometimes for some of these teams is a year-round sport, right? Like, so there's going to be a point where the NCAA says, hey, look, for these 2 weeks or these 3 weeks, enough, stop. Everyone put down your phones, like pay your phone bills, go on vacation, rest. And then, at this certain point, then you can hit the ground running again. I wonder if that comes to fruition very soon, because I feel like that will be something instituted by the coaches that you mentioned. The coaches are going to be the ones that are going to step up and say, look, guys, I need rest. I know I get paid a lot of money, but that doesn't mean I need a holiday off. I don't even get the bank holidays anymore. Give me a week so that we can recharge our batteries. I think that is the going rate at this point. But again, everything is so fluid when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to NIL and all of this stuff. Jason, before we wrap up, real quickly, just want to note for everyone out there that we just, I think today, got word that Countdown to Craziness has a date. And that date is Friday, October 4th. I believe it's a 7 p.m. tip-off. Obviously, it will be at Cameron. This is the real start of the basketball season for Duke fans. It's the first chance that you get to see the 2024-25 Duke basketball team. Jason is a little bit earlier.
Men's and women's.
Men's and women's, yeah.
Yeah.
For both teams. And it's great that they have both. The women are usually at like 7 o'clock, with the men starting at 8 o'clock, and you get to see the dances, you get to see the introductions, you get to see the new videos and the posters, and then you get to see a little bit of Duke basketball, at least in scrimmage form at this point. But Jason, it is a little bit earlier this year. Usually it's mid to late October. We're thinking like October 20th or something like that. Usually allowing for guys to get more practiced in, because as we mentioned, they used to have a period where you couldn't see the coaches couldn't watch the team play, so they only had a couple of weeks for practices before this thing. Now, with the schedule kind of allowing them to see this team develop over the summer, you don't need to wait until late October to do it. And maybe it allows for more time for rest before the start. Maybe schedule a couple of exhibition games as opposed to just one. But give me your thoughts on Countdown to Craziness, and are you going to be able to make it? Because I know we talked about whether you'd be able to make it.
Yeah. I think I am. I'm going to try to. I haven't put my travel plans in place yet. I didn't expect it to be this early. You're right. Last year, Countdown to Craziness was October 21st.
There you go.
We're getting, 2.5 weeks earlier than last year this time. And I think that's a good thing. Like you say, it means there's gonna be more time for exhibitions. It just means there's a bit more time for this team to come together. It is, a team of mostly newcomers. We got 2 guys back. Well, more than that if you count the walk-ons, but yeah, essentially in our rotation, we have 2 guys back, and we've got 7, 8, 9 more guys that we got to integrate in with them. So more time is a good thing for Duke. And I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, I do think I'm going to make it up to Durham. I really want to see the beginning of the Cooper Flagg era. I couldn't be more excited for that guy.
There's such excitement about this season, and there's always excitement about Countdown, because again, it's the first time that you get to see a team. But yeah, this might be a hard ticket, Jason. I don't know if you need to go as media or if you need to find a ticket, but if you have tickets for Countdown for Jason, dbrpodcast@gmail.com, hit him up. I'm sure he will be glad to take one.
Hang on. I'm gonna don't do it yet, because I'll be talking to the Duke press office, the Duke Sports Information Director. We have a relationship. My bet is I'll be able to work it out through them, but that process is a little ways off. I don't want anybody going out of their way. I do appreciate it's wonderful the number of people who offer us tickets. It's really great, and I will say, Donald, for the most part, I do enjoy sitting in the stands more than sitting on press row. You have to be a little more reserved on press row, and you and I love to go to those games and go crazy in the stands. So that is enjoyable. But yeah, I think I want to do press row for Countdown.
I mean, it's the one game a year where Duke's going to win, so you don't have to worry about that, and you can, it's going to be fine. It's at least the one guaranteed win that we have, because it's Duke versus Duke. So with that, we're going to end it here on this edition of the Duke Basketball Roundup. Again, if you have questions, topics you want us to cover, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Get them in. We have it seems like football is around the corner. It's because football is around the corner. So I'm sure as we enter August, we are going to talk a lot about Manny Diaz and the football team as they get ready for a season on the gridiron. But until then, For Jason Evans, I am Donald Wine, and for Jamie Shaw, again, thank you for joining us on the DVR podcast. And now it is time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, and anytime that y'all ever, please don't hesitate. I live in Raleigh, actually.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, so I'm actually over at Duke a good bit to go see staff and hang out and all that type of stuff, too. So, don't hesitate to have me on again.
Yeah, we would love to. So, wait, I got to know. Wait, you live in Raleigh. UNC, yeah. NC State, or Duke?
So, I went to South Carolina.
Okay. That's how you dodge a question.
Yeah. My brother went to NC State. I grew up a fan of Dean Smith, and I have a great relationship with all three programs when it comes to the coaching staff and stuff. I'm over at all three of them a good bit. Wake Forest as well. But when the triangle is good at basketball, when you have guys making Final Four runs like NC State, everything just seems to be better in college basketball when the triangle is good at basketball.
I think we agree on that. As much as we love to beat them, it does feel better when they're better. So
yeah, no, it makes the win feel that much better.